Chapter 20. The moon, soaring above the rugged mountains far to the east, bathed the lawless range in liquid silver. Nothing stirred in that wane of sea of light. An hour passed, and another. Waiting, the men chafed at their inability to smoke or stir about. In the early morning hours, Lytle Charter began to get restless. "Reckon we picked the wrong night, Rayburn, or else they're wise to us." Rayburn had nothing to say. All his forces flowed into the endless, unsleeping patience. The moon sank, and pre-dawn darkness thickened. The air was chilly, and the dreamy silence intense. The majority of these men had given up hope of any luck tonight when suddenly Rayburn peered something sharply and then murmured, "Something's moving down there." The others had their look. They tightened up abruptly. Drifting out of the little basin below could be discerned a number of dusky shadows. They were horsemen. There must have been a dozen or more. "They're spreading out," Charter muttered tensely. "Figured to comb the basin clean." "Hold on," Rayburn ordered fiercely when the others started to shove his pony forward. "We're making sure of these gents this trip. Let 'em put their cards on the table before we take our trek." The raiders were not slow in getting to work. Silence except for the occasional curt demand of their horses, they began to drift Rayburn's stock down the draws. No proof was needed as to their identity, nor any assurance of their object. Charter watched till he could stand no more, and then he burst out, "Hellfire, Rayburn, how long you going to let this go on? Them wolves are smearing themselves to the eyebrows." For answer, Rayburn whipped out his 6-gun and fired the prearranged signal. As he did so, he jammed the spurs home and raced down the slope. Charter and Ballard were close behind. There was need for quick action now. The gunshots alone had been enough to tell the renegades they were discovered. They could hardly miss spotting the shadowy attackers converging with a rush from every point of compass. A warning yell rang out, and it was followed instantly by the spiteful blaze of gunfire. Rayburn had laid cunning plans for a surrounding of the rustlers, hoping to draw a net upon them through which escape would be impossible for a single man. Hard on his signal, the cordon began to close in swiftly and smoothly. Had all gone according to schedule, the plan would have worked perfectly. But a hitch occurred. Rayburn's steers, which had come up over the dreaded Horsehead route from central Texas, were longhorns, wild and spooky as deer. It took little to throw them into a panic. When the circle of fire suddenly broke out about them, flecking the night at every crash of a gun, the steers tore loose. The warning cries and the returning fire of the renegades did nothing to improve the situation. In fact, wary as they were, accustomed to the instantaneous decisions in matters controlling life or death, they grasped the possibilities of a stampede with firm decision. Gift Naylor was the first to read the situation in true light. "Watch 'em!" he roared. "Them steers will bust a hole in the line 1/2 mile wide. Them wolves will give us the slip." Rayburn was not long in determining that he was right. With a thunder of hooves and a clicking of horns, the herd started away at top speed, and the raiders, calling to one another sharply, were clinging close to the drag. Not only did they thus stick closely together, but the billowing dust aided in their concealment. "Shoot 'em down!" Matt Ballard bellowed wrathfully. "We're finishing this right here." It was easier said than done, however. Reading to the end just how desperate their case was, the rustlers cut loose with a blast after blast of furious gunfire. Those of Rayburn's supporters, who were in the path of the stampeding steers, were forced to flee for their lives. The rest were so confused by the churning dust and the uncertainty as to who was friend or who was enemy, they could do little. It was Lytle Charter who hit on the only possible answer. "Tail the steers!" he cried. They can't stick with 'em forever. When they pull away, we'll fog 'em and drag 'em down." They did as they said. Not once did the bitter fire of the rustlers slack off. Rayburn's reins were all but torn out of his hand by a snarling slug, and he saw Gift Nailor wipe the blood from his torn ear. Others were hit, but all clung to the chase with a dogged determination. For several miles the steers raced on, bellowing their terror, the yells of the renegade urging them ever faster. But now the first light began to streak the eastern sky and broaden. It was possible to see with some certainty. Ignoring the dangers to themselves, Rayburn and the others pressed close, fighting for an occasional good shot. At a sudden burst of firing from Lytle Charter, one of the rustlers abruptly folded out of the saddle. Striking the ground, he bounced, end over end, limbs flying. It was too much for his friends. One of them yelled something to his companion. The next instant they swung away from the steers and headed across the range, driving their ponies like mad. It became a hard running fight, with neither side scoring any advantage. The renegades managed to hold their lead by a narrow margin, and outnumbered as they were, they dared not hold up. It was Rayburn who first took note of the direction of their flight. "They're making for the pitchfork," he hollered. "I reckon that simplifies matters considerably," Ballard tossed back harshly. "We'll clean house with the whole kit and boil 'em all." The sentiment exactly agreed with Rayburn's feelings at the moment, nor did he feel any different when, an hour later, the buildings of the Shane ranch house came into view across the range. In broad daylight there was no longer any question that the rustlers were pitchfork punchers to a man, nor did they seek to conceal the fact, driving forward and firing their guns frantically to call attention to their plight. Rayburn saw men boiling out of the bunkhouse. Others ran from the ranch house itself. Early sunlight glinted on rifle barrels, and a second later Dan Shane appeared, bellowing his orders. The men with the rifles threw them to their shoulders and fired. Dust puffed the ground around the posse, and one or two instances between them. "Right on in," Ballard bawled. "Don't let 'em make a stand off of this." The rustlers were almost at the ranch by now. Racing in the yard, they jumped off their horses. Rayburn saw a poke flasher in their midst, asking questions, demanding commands. As the lead from the attackers' guns began to scream close, these men milled about for a moment, then started to dusk hastily indoors. Some ran for the barns, but by far the greater number retired into the sprawling one-story ranch house with Shane. Even as he rode near, Rayburn began to lay a plan of attack against this fortress. Thick-walled, of impenetrable adobe, it would be impossible to smoke the defenders out except by a long siege. The only hope lay in storming the place. "Take half a dozen of men and clean out the barns," he called to Ballard. "We don't want any shooting in the back of this." With the remainder, he struck forward towards the house. The pitchfork was ready for them. Before they could be within 100 yards, a furious blast of firing met them. A horse went down. A puncher cursed heatedly at the stock of his rifle, was smashed into smithers. Nobody hesitated. They were following Rayburn now, and he thrust forward with a deadly intent, his guns barking. Windows crashed into fragments, and smoke curled from the open doors in sullen coils. Dan Shane must have found food for thought in the circumstance when the angry stockman thundered into his ranch yard and flung out of the saddle. The latter's fire was so hot that for a moment defense was unorganized. But somebody flung the front door shut, and the bar rattled into place as Rayburn reached the gallery. Rayburn called, "Lend a hand here." With Charter and two others, he ripped down one of the gallery pillars. It made an effective battering ram, and at the third blow the door shattered. Rayburn and Gift Nailor kicked it out of the way. A fusillade swept in the opening as they started in. A bullet grazed Rayburn's ribs, and another tore a chunk out of his hat brim. That could not deter him. Charter was no less eager to come to grips with the enemy. "One side," he rapped out. "By Godfrey, they asked for this. We'll clean 'em out of here like rats." Rayburn sprung in ahead of him, and for a moment he could see little, so thick was the smoke. But guns blazed almost in his face, and a yell of alarm sounded. A man sprung at him with murderous intent, and a gun roared at Rayburn's side, and the man measured his length in a sprawl. It was Giff who had fired. "He damn near got you then," he told Rayburn with a wolfish grin. Rayburn was intent on the peril of their position. It did not escape him that they had broken into a hall, and the pitchfork had promptly retired to inner rooms, shutting the doors and firing through them at every conceivable angle. "Keep on going," Charter cried. Rayburn arrested him sharply. "There's no use in throwing lives away here," he exclaimed. "There's no room for the ram either. We'll have to work this from the outside." They retired in good order. Many of their number had already sought the windows and were driving a wedge into the patio, their guns pounding. Reaching the gallery, Rayburn halted beyond reach of straying shots and called, "Shane! Dan Shane!" The pitchfork head did not answer, but a moment later a man called from the side of the house. "Hey, Rayburn! Shane's around here!" Rayburn hurried that way. Reaching the window indicated, he called again. "Shane!" "Well?" came a rasping choir from within, above the flat crack of guns. "Come on out, Shane," Rayburn told him. "Give yourself up and you'll be spared." His answer was an outburst of angry cussing. Rayburn tried to reason with the rancher, but it was of no use. Suddenly a new cry was raised. It came from the corner of the house. "Rayburn! Look out for Poke! He's right over your head!" Rayburn instinctively ducked and shot a look upward. He caught a fleeting glimpse of Poke Flasher crouching on the roof. The other was glaring at him murderously, his gun trained directly upon him. In that moment, the latter was sure he had come to the end of his string. It was not possible that he could escape the death that Flasher designed for him this time. Even as he started to fling himself aside, Poke fired. The slug smashed the side of Rayburn's head, knocking him down like a lightning bolt. He didn't lose consciousness, however. Laying on the ground, he flung up his gun and cut loose. In the act of getting up from his knees, Flasher froze suddenly. A look of amazement washed over his expressionless eyes. And then they were more expressionless than ever, glassy, and Poke suddenly folded forward and tumbled off the roof, dead before he struck the ground. Giff Naylor ran up to Rayburn's side. "Did he get you, Clark?" Rayburn struggled up, a fighting look on his face, and he grunted. "He's creased my head is all." Mart Ballard had returned from the barns in time to see Rayburn kill Flasher and get to his feet. "By God, that's a plenty!" he burst out fiercely. "We'll finish this in short order." Rayburn felt the same way. "Follow me," he jerked out, making for the open window. Without a second's hesitation, he vaulted inside and, crouching, his guns roaring. The others tumbled in after him. The half-dozen men in this room were unprepared for such a savage an attack. They fired at random. Then they dropped their guns and yelled for quarter. The association members made a rush for the door. They boiled through the house. Nothing could stop them. As a matter of fact, Flasher's finish had taken the fight out of the pitchfork men. Dan Shane yelled encouragement to them, but they were done. One after another, they gave themselves up, fearing only that they might be cut down on the spot. Shane was cornered in the kitchen, making a desperate dash for the open. Lytle Charter knocked him sprawling and kicked the gun out of his hand. The renegades were hustled into the yard and then quickly disarmed. Their defeat scarcely satisfied these aroused ranchers, however. "String 'em up!" The cry was raised by a puncher. It was taken up by another. To their surprise, Rayburn backed against the prisoners and presented a cold-faced front, his guns ready. Giff Naylor stared for a second and then sprang to his side. No, you don't, Rayburn droned out. There won't be any hanging here. We got these hombres exactly where we want 'em. We don't propose to throw everything away by doing something foolish at the end. For 10 seconds, silence fell, broke only by the harsh breathing of the men whose lives were at stake. Charter and Ballard gazed at Rayburn in surprise. Why, hell, Rayburn, the latter exclaimed. We've been aiming to finish these buzzards once and for all right from the start. What you driving at? There won't be any more rustling on this range, was the flat answer. These men are going to be turned over to the law. There's no danger of 'em slipping through the net this time. They saw he was right, and that he meant to back his stand to the end. Ballard was reluctant. I reckon you're right at that. The words broke the tension, and a man growled. Hell, let's toss 'em on their horses and get started for town then. It was soon done. Still grimly silent, the cattlemen herded their captives in the direction of Salt Creek. Town was reached shortly after noon. Ash Flansher saw the cavalcade approaching and then stepped into the street. What's the meaning of this, Rayburn? He demanded. I'm slapping a charge of rustling upon these men, Flasher, was the answer. They were caught red-handed. You can do what you want with them, but I advise you to toss them into cells right away. Well, Flasher was at a loss for a moment, but then quickly regained his self-command. If that's how the matter stands, we'll get right down to the jail. 20 minutes saw the last of the prisoners locked into cells. Townspeople, attracted by the excitement, arrived from every direction. Standing before the jail, Ballard, Charter, and the others told their story. Rayburn, however, saw that his job was done, and then turned away. He was passing through the hall of the courthouse on his way to the district attorney's office when, to his surprise, the latter's door opened, and Wilkin Landis stood there. What you doing here, Landis? The judge smiled. Word's reached me that things are in an unsettled condition, and I just decided to delay my trip a few days. It looks like I didn't make any mistake there, Clark. Rayburn followed him into the office and recounted the brief story of the past 24 hours. I'm here to give myself up, Mr. District Attorney, if you got anything against me, he concluded. I've always fought on the side of law and order, but if you can't see it that way now... It looks like you done right on doing that, Clark, Landis interrupted smoothly. The DEA nodded. I don't believe any charges will be brought against you, Rayburn, he said. If there are, I'll know where to find you. It was enough for Rayburn. He left a few minutes later, Landis accompanying him. Better get over and see the doctor about that head, the latter suggested. They found that the doctor was in. Rayburn's wound was soon cared for, and Landis was still with him when he left. They started down the street talking, but on the corner of Pardo Street, Rayburn halted abruptly. Loren's home was this way, and he had no intentions of going there. Landis read in his face what he was thinking. I've seen her, Clark, he said quickly. She's waiting for you. Rayburn could not conceal his surprise, but he was nothing loath. When they reached the door of the parsonage, he was almost hurrying. At a call from behind, they saw Bronson Colcord just returning from church, and Landis went to wait before him, but Rayburn went on, and he knocked at the door. Clark! Loren exclaimed brokenly when she saw who it was. Her eyes widened as she took in the bandage around his head. My dear, you're hurt. You've been wounded. She came to him as he stepped inside. It seemed the most natural thing in the world to take her into his arms, nor did she appear to find anything wrong with it. It's all right, it's just a scratch, he told her. Her eyes were tender as she met his look and held it. Thank God that you were spared. Nothing else matters. Will you forgive me for the things I said to you? There's nothing to forgive, he assured her huskily. But there is, she insisted. I wanted you to be different, yet from the beginning I loved you for what you are. You did the right thing, Clark, and my heart tells me that now. Don't ever be different from what you are, no matter what I say. He could scarcely believe his ears. The wonder of it all was too plain in his tone. Then you mean nothing's changed between you and me? Loren only raised her lips in mute invitation, but the manner in which he sought and found them said that he found her answer eloquent enough. End of chapter 20. End of Law Badge by Peter Field.